right, good afternoon, everyone. We're just logging in and getting started. Get your cup of coffee, iced tea. I don't know what the beverage of choice is at this hour of the day. Hopefully not a mint julep. I don't know. It's not horse race season here. And we'll get started in just a minute. As we're getting started, I'd love to invite folks through the chat to let us know what year is your student graduating from high school? Is it 2025, 2026? Kind of give us an idea of what your schedule is right now. Put that into the chat and share that with us. All right, 2025. Awesome, good.
A lot of 25s.
Yeah,
Perfect
that's great.
time to
Yeah, it
have this
really is.
conversation if you have a junior.
Mm-hmm. And how about let us know in the chat, will this be your first child going into college, or do you have an older sibling, or let us know. Okay. All right, we got some first and second children. Great. Great. Wily veterans of a second child by now, huh? All right. Well, why don't we go ahead? Let's see, we're a couple minutes after the hour. Why don't we go ahead and get started? I'd like to welcome all of you today. I don't know if this is the first time you've ever joined us, or you're a groupie, as we like to call them, like you've come on to maybe a few of the many College Aid Pro webinars that we deliver. And uh, my name's Michael Korch. I'm happy to be spending some time with you today. And um, my background real quickly, and then Dan will, I'm sure, will introduce himself. So I've been working in this space for not very long, just about a little over a year. And I've got three kids. I've got a 22-year-old, and then I have twin 19-year-olds that are sophomores in college right now. I'm in Seattle. My daughters didn't venture too far away, but when we were doing research 3 or 4 years ago, I found College Aid Pro and was enormously beneficial for our family. And one, just kind of understanding what the modern process is to do this, and just how to kind of save on the cost of college, and where and how to do that. So as you can see from our mission, this really is the College Aid Pro's mission, is to really, they're very focused on ending the student debt crisis, but it's really through empowering through knowledge and learning how to shop more intelligently to fit your budget so we don't overextend. So Dan, please, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Dan. I'm in the Chicagoland area. And I got into this business basically right after I graduated college back in 2003. Um, my father just put me through college and made a bunch of mistakes and realized that there was an industry that could help other parents figure out how to do this from a financial standpoint. So we basically set up our own business and have been and started helping parents figure out how they were going to pay for college. So I have been doing this for about 20 years, working with parents on the financial side of things, of helping them navigate this complex system and making sure that they are paying for this as efficiently as humanly possible and trying not to leave any money on the table.
Excellent. That's great. Well, if you haven't already, we encourage you to set up your MyCap account. I believe that your school was kind enough to provide that MyCap premium account for you. What we have on the screen is just kind of the general um, URL, or the web address that folks can come and set up a free account that allows them to take a look at up to 3 schools. When you click on your link that was provided by your school, you'll be able to create kind of a unique username and password. select the premium account option, put in the coupon code that was shared with you, and you get a 1-year annual subscription, which is fantastic. So, um, you're probably uh, aware of, kind of like airline flights, like the price that you pay for your seat is one amount, and it's entirely possible the person that's sitting next to you paid a completely different price. And that's very much the way kind of school works now. 4-year education works as well. One roommate, another roommate can have really different price points for the same quote unquote education. So, what's great about this software is that once you put in some basic information about your family's finances, your student's academic record, you're going to see that the school prices will be adjusted, will be reduced based on kind of your projected need-based financial aid and the merit-based scholarship. So it's almost kind of like having a crystal ball for your college shopping and enabling you to build really a better list, a more affordable list that's going to fit into your family budget. So if you haven't set that up, please take some time today, tomorrow to do this and get started. And it's going to be really helpful on your journey over the next year. So let's talk a little bit about, kind of some context here, like what is financial aid? So in its simplest terms, really, it's a discount off of the school's sticker price. So, as they call it, the cost of attendance. And there's 3 ways to get discounts, and we're really focused on kind of the first 2 buckets. So, starting from the left here, need-based grants. These are from colleges, the federal government, or state government. It's based on your family's financial information, most heavily on income and non-retirement assets. So it's going to vary drastically based on the school. You'll hear us say this a bunch of times, is that every school is different. And really, we have the burden to really kind of understand for those schools that interest us, what's their business model? Are they generous with need-based financial aid or not generous? The middle bucket here next is merit-based scholarships. That's another type of free money, but it's not based on your family's financial position. It's based on your student's academic and talent profile. So, I occasionally will have a family say, my students, I feel like kind of in the middle of the pack, where they don't test very well. They didn't really take AP classes. They think that their student, is not going to get a merit scholarship, and that's not necessarily true at all. Many colleges provide scholarships for many of the incoming students that they accept, and really the tricky part for us is to figure out which are those schools. Are they a good academic and a social fit, and do they fit our budget as well? So the final bucket on the right, in the industry, we call that self-help, which realize this is not free money. It doesn't reduce the price of school, but it can help your family pay for the school bill. It's in the form of loans plus interest, which we have to pay back, and work study, which gives our students some money in exchange for typically an on-campus job. So after being accepted to a school, you'll receive a customized financial aid award letter, and a percentage of your award will be this self-help money. We just got to remember that that's not free money. Okay, so how do colleges, figure out if you're eligible for financial aid? Well, while every college is different, kind of this formula on the page is one of the universal truths about every college really uses to determine your eligibility for need-based financial aid or lack thereof. So the cost of attendance on the left there, that's a college's total estimated expenses for 1 year of school. It includes tuition, room and board, books, supplies, transportation, student fees, kind of miscellaneous expenses. From that, you're going to subtract your student aid index, your SAI. If you have an older student, it used to be called the expected family contribution, the EFC. They've renamed it. It's a dollar amount that's going to be assigned to your family, and you need to know what this number is. That's one of the primary reasons we encourage you to set up your MyCap account, because we'll calculate that for you in the software. because if that number is less than the cost of attendance at a university, the difference is your eligibility for need-based financial aid. So let's use kind of a quick, simple example. If the school's cost of attendance is $90,000 for a year and your student aid index is $50,000, then you're eligible for $40,000 in need-based aid. So the next kind of logical question is, okay, so what happens with that $40,000 difference? Like, do we pay for that? Does the school pay for that? Do we both contribute? And the answer is, you probably guessed, is it depends on the college. So the student aid index tells us that's probably the minimum that we're going to pay at any school. How much more we pay is dictated by how generous or not, the colleges are with need-based financial aid. And there's a massive range. So a source of truth for you is to, take advantage of that MyCap account where you can see how generous or not the schools are that are on your list. All right, so great. We got to be aware of the student aid index. So what makes that number up? And there's two main parts. There's assets, both for the parent and the student, and then income also for the parent and the student. So let's start with assets. It's all of your assets except your retirement accounts. So hopefully you've been saving for retirement. Those funds aren't going to be considered for educational funding. But essentially, like, everything else is on the table: checking and savings accounts, brokerage accounts, certificates of deposits. If you have 529 accounts, those education funding accounts, and you as the parent own the 529, your child is the beneficiary, that's considered for financial aid. That's a parent-owned asset. So it's real important that on the financial aid forms, you list it as a parent-owned asset, not owned by your child. It's important because parent assets are assessed at up to 5.64%, whereas student assets are assessed starting at 22%. So it's not a mistake you want to make on the financial aid forms. Now, if grandma or Uncle Bob creates a 529 for your student, or you have 529s for your other kids, you're not going to share those for this child's financial aid forms. Okay. If you
One thing
have, oh,
hey,
please
just
jump
real
in.
quick, on the 529 thing too, to keep in mind, if the parents are divorced, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but assuming the parents are divorced, and let's say, for instance, mom is the one filling out the FAFSA for the student because she provides a majority of that student's financial aid support. And if they'd started a 529 years ago, but dad is the owner of that 529, not the mother who's completing the FAFSA in this example, then the 529 value would also be excluded from the FAFSA form. So again, typically the 529 is owned by one or the other of the parents. It's typically not joint owned. So if you are divorced, you'll want to check the statement to see who owns it when you're filling out that FAFSA form to know how it should be reported. Oh, and one other thing too, if anyone has questions as we're going through here, please feel free to post them in the Q&A and we'll try and get to as many of those as possible.
Thank you, Dan. If you have a custodial account, an UGMA or an UTMA account, it's like a gift account for your child. It's a student-owned asset. And there are strategies that can place these accounts in the parent's name, so they're assessed at a lower value. That may or may not be something you want to consider. There are potential tax implications with those strategies. So we just say, make sure that you discuss that with a financial advisor or a tax professional before you take those on. If you have jointly owned assets, the account is owned both by the parents and the student, you as the parent can claim these assets on the financial aid forms. So for assets, the account values that you'll provide are essentially from the day you submit the financial aid form. Now with real estate, your primary residence is not included on the FAFSA. And there are a group of schools, however, that will look at the amount of your equity that you have in your primary residence. So You always want to be honest, but you want to find what we call the lowest defensible market value. The takeaway is not to overvalue your assets and your real estate. Okay, so that's for assets. It's the current value. Now for income, we're going to take a look at the prior tax year. This means a 2-year look back. So for those of you that are going to have a child starting, September or fall of 2025, going to take a look back to the 2023 tax year. For a younger child that's 2026, it's going to look back to 2024 and so on. So the biggest driver of income is your AGI, or your adjusted gross income, that you report on your 1040 tax form. There is a parent allowance, but it's pretty small. The student income allowance is just over $9,400. And that means, if your student works during the year or has a summer job, if they're earning in total below $9,400, essentially that's not going to count as income during this period from that student. So that's kind of a quick introduction to assets and income, kind of how they're assessed for financial aid purposes. And Dan's going to take us into kind of now talking about merit-based aid.
Sure. So for merit-based aid, now this is not, or has nothing to do with mom and dad's income and assets, but it's all based on the student's merits. The most common one I would say would be academic merit scholarships. So that's where it's tied to the kids' GPA, ACT, SAT, that sort of thing. But other merit scholarships could be tied to music or athletics or anything really. But it's going to be something on the student's merit, which is separate from the parents' finances. And if the student gets an academic merit scholarship, the good news is it will be fixed for the 4 years. So you can basically set your watch to knowing exactly the amount of scholarship your kid's going to receive every year. Generally, the schools will have like a minimum GPA requirement to keep the scholarship up. But outside of that, you're going to get it every year. Versus if you are qualifying or receiving a need-based grant, then that would be dependent on refiling the financial aid forms every year. So if your income increased moving forward, the grant could decrease. You don't have that issue with a merit-based scholarship. And could you go to the next slide, please? And now, okay, so hopefully everyone's set up their MyCap account. I'm going to go into the website here just to give you guys a brief little tutorial so you can kind of see how this all works. So hopefully everyone can see my screen okay here. And this way, you can see if you fill out your profile, you're going to know what your SAI is, or student aid index. So when you look at the profile here, we've got Vivian, who's my oldest. There's the federal and there's the institutional. The federal SAI, that's for schools who just require the FAFSA form. So Penn State and Maryland would fall into that category. The institutional methodology is for schools that require an additional financial aid form called the CSS profile. And the reason you see a range there is because those schools generally require your home equity comes into play in determining the SAI, and some schools value it more than others. So that's why there's not an exact number. It will depend per school. And in the top right-hand side here by the profile, that's where you click on your information and you put in all the information for your student as well as your financial information. And like anything else, the more accurate you input your information, the more accurate the results are going to be when you're looking at this. And this tool is going to really help you understand, okay, based on, my kids' grades and scores and my financial situation and the schools my child is looking to target, what can I expect in terms of money? What does it look like this is going to cost? So, down here, I picked 3 examples of schools. We've got our in-state Penn State school, we got an out-of-state public school, Maryland, and then University of Penn, obviously a high-priced elite type private school. So one thing that may jump out at you is that based on this person's profile, it was, you know, far cheaper for the parent to send their kid to Penn, one of the most expensive schools out there, than University of Maryland. And this may not be atypical depending on your situation, meaning sometimes these private schools, although they can have a really high sticker price, they could end up being less expensive from a like a net out of pocket standpoint for the parent, depending on the entire situation. So the MyCap software is going to do a great job of helping you understand how much these schools are willing to offer. So at Penn, if it says the sticker price is 87,000 and your net cost is 23,000, that's because they're supplementing it with, in this case, need-based grants. Um, you can also um, within the system, you can search for other schools. And there's a number of different filters that you could create as a way to search. So let's say we're going to look for schools that are ranked, and we want the major to be biology, and we want to know, we want to have a 4-year college, and we want to find schools that offer a scholarship, and and then let's see. Okay, that looks good. So let's see what populates here. And then this will populate a number of schools that you can then search for. And obviously, you can tailor the filters however you like, trying to see, depending on if you're looking based on cost, major, that sort of thing. So again, I can't implore you enough how great this software is in terms of instead of flying blind and just letting your kids apply wherever you want and then waiting for the offers to come in, the software is going to give you a really good idea before your kids apply what those offers are going to look like. So if you're trying to tailor the list to fit within a certain budget, you're not going to be applying to schools that you know are just going to be outside of that budget. So again, everyone should set up their free profile, and then you can input your information to get a better idea of what this is going to look like for you. Um, okay, now how do we get back? Mike, how do I get out of here now? How do we go back to the presentation? I can't remember that part. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, there we go. Okay, so all right, we're good now, right? All right, great. So what if I don't qualify for need-based aid? Like I just talked about, merit scholarships, again, have nothing to do with your income and assets. So if you don't qualify for need-based grants, really the best way for you to get a discount is going to be to identify schools that are going to provide your kids with an academic merit scholarship. And these merit scholarships, or at least I would say most of the scholarships that we see kids getting are of the academic variety, really just tied to the kids' grades and test scores. Um, and doesn't matter what their grades or scores are, it's a combination of how their grades and scores align with the college they're applying to, meaning, harder to get a scholarship from Michigan than Michigan State, for example. So don't think like, oh, my kid only has like a 3.0 or whatever, they're not going to get a scholarship. Well, yeah, they might not get a scholarship at UCLA, but there's going to be lots of other schools that will. And again, the MyCap software will help you figure that out. When you input your kids' grades and test scores into the profile and you include the schools, it's going to tell you what's available potentially for an academic merit scholarship. Um, One thing to keep in mind in terms of this merit based aid, even though you maybe don't qualify for need based aid, another reason why you're going to want to fill out these financial aid forms is some schools require them for their merit-based scholarships. NYU is a good example of that. So even though you don't technically qualify for financial aid, or maybe you don't think you do, or you put your information in the software and you realize you don't, it's still probably going to be worth your time to complete those forms. Um, Another thing to realize is there are some schools that do not offer scholarships, like Penn, for example, and the Ivy League schools. They do not offer merit-based scholarships to anyone. The only money that they're offering is in the form of need-based grants. So if you don't qualify for need-based financial aid and your student can get into Penn, you are going to be paying full price, unfortunately. That's just kind of the system and how it works. But Obviously, if your student can get into Penn, there's a whole lot of other schools that want to admit that kid. And maybe if you're looking like a tier or two below, those are schools that are going to heavily discount their price tag through some academic merit scholarships for that student.
Dan,
Okay,
Dan,
next.
we have a question. Maybe you can touch real quickly about someone asked if you can add schools from overseas onto MyCap.
That's a good question. I think that there are some in there, but not all of them. I would say, um, in general, if you're looking to go overseas, I think you need to be prepared. A good planning would be you're paying sticker price. I'm not saying it's not possible to get a scholarship from schools that are overseas, um, but for the few clients that I have had that have done that, they're almost always paying full price. But with that said, you can find some pretty good deals overseas too, especially if I know I have a number of clients who have like dual Canadian citizenship. And then for the schools in Canada, they're not paying the international rate, they're paying like a discounted rate. Um, but also don't be surprised if some of those schools they can also be pretty expensive too. So you've got to do your research and go on the college's websites. Unfortunately, I would say that universally, the schools that are overseas, their websites are not going to be as easy to review as ours trying to find the prices. One, they're very ambiguous about the prices sometimes, and then obviously you've got to potentially do like a USD converter type thing. Um, okay, in terms of applying for financial aid, like we've talked about, no two schools are alike. The software is going to help you understand that, right? Don't just assume because your SAI is 30,000 that every school that's above that cost is going to give you the difference in a grant. It's not necessarily going to work that way. Generally speaking, I would say that the private schools are going to do a better job than the public schools of offering need-based grants. And generally speaking, I would say those public universities, especially the large ones, the money that they're giving out is more in the form of academic merit than the form of grants. Um, Another thing to keep in mind is we've been talking a lot about FAFSA. You're probably hearing a lot about the FAFSA, but there is another key form called the CSS profile that a couple hundred schools out there require. Penn and Vanderbilt, the Ivy League schools, Tulane, University of Miami, a couple examples of schools that fall into that category. I did put a link in the chat for the schools that require the CSS. So keep in mind that if your student is applying to a school that requires it, you are going to have to do that form on top of the FAFSA form. Deadlines. One of the most confusing parts about this whole thing is that not only does every school operate differently, they all have different deadlines based on how the kid applies, early decision, early action, regular decision. So there's no universal deadline that I can tell you. You'll have to check the college's financial aid website and see based on how your kid is applying as to when the due date is going to be for financial aid. Um, Generally speaking, before all the FAFSA mess, I would say that um, if your kid's applying early decision, usually that deadline's around mid-November, early action, late December, and regular decision, maybe late January, early February. But again, nothing's universal. You'll have to check the college's website based on how your student is applying to see when those deadlines are. And you got to meet them, right? You got to get everything in on time. The quicker you get this stuff done, the quicker you're going to get those results back from the college. And if the FAFSA is broken again next year, although you do it quickly, it still may take 3, 4 months to get the answers back. So you definitely want to fill this stuff out sooner rather than later. Um, Next slide, please. Okay, so for the FAFSA, we've got the website up here. That's where you'll go to complete it. And previously, it was available October 1st. This past year, with all the issues, it really didn't come live until the end of December. I'd love to tell you when it's going to be available for our 2025 class here, but no one has any idea. They can't get out of their own way. They don't know what's happening. So um, it could be live, I would say, anywhere between October and January, I guess, for your juniors. So time will tell on that. But unlike the assets, which when you're filling this out, you're going to report as of the day you fill out the form, income's a little bit different. They're going to be looking 2 years back. So for you parents of juniors, For the 2025 class, their freshman year's financial aid is going to be based off the income you earned in 2023. Good news is if you filed that tax return, boom, you just look at it, you plug the information into the MyCap profile, and you know the information is going to be accurate. So now that if you filed your 23 return, we can give you a really good idea as to what that student aid index is going to be, because that's a major factor in determining what it will be. Um, and then the custodial parent submits these forms. So if the parents are divorced, according to the new FAFSA rules, let's say mom and dad are divorced, and mom provides a majority of that student's financial support over the previous year. If that's the case, then mom is going to be the one submitting the FAFSA. And dad's information isn't going to be anywhere on that form other than any alimony or child support he may provide. But outside of that, in this example, dad doesn't have to do anything with the FAFSA form. If mom was remarried, though, then the stepdad or mom's new husband would be basically considered the father for financial aid purposes. Um, Another thing to keep in mind is prior to being able to submit the FAFSA, both the student and the parent is going to have to create what's called an FSA ID. There's a link here on the page for how you can do that. Um, It'll take a couple days to get activated to pass through the Social Security Administration, but you will need a valid FSA ID for the kid, and then typically just one of the parents, usually not both. But there are, if you're filing, if you're doing a married filing separate tax return, then that is an example where both parents would need an FSA ID. Okay, a couple tips for the divorced parents, like we talked about. Um, Remember, they're asking when you're deciding which parent should be filling out the FAFSA, it's which parent, according to the rules, provided a majority of the financial support over the previous year. That doesn't necessarily mean which parent earned more money. It's which parent provided a majority of the support. And there's a lot of cases where maybe one parent earned less than the other, but did provide a majority of that support. So that's definitely an area where we can get strategic. Unfortunately, with the new FAFSA rules, multiple kids in college are not given a benefit. Previously, they would divide that SAI. If you had two kids in college and it was 30 grand, it would be 15,000 per student, but they're not doing that any longer. But the good news is most of the institutional methodology schools are still abiding by those rules. So that's why when you're filling out the MyCat profile, you may notice, hey, why is this school giving me so much more in the form of grants than this one? And that could be one of the reasons. One school's using the federal methodology, the other, the institutional. Um, and with the new rules for FAFSA, they now want you to include business values if you have, regardless of how many employees you have. Previously, if you had less than 100 employees, you didn't have to report that balance. So, another area where you can get strategic. I see a lot of people overvaluing their business on these forms. Um, the college has no idea what your business is worth. So, my suggestion would be conservative. Um, Despite all of these FAFSA issues, the whole point of this was to get more people to complete the form and make more federal and state aid available to the low income families. That was the goal. Um, the formula is designed to do that. Now, I guess we could argue whether or not those families are filling the thing out because it's too hard to do, but that's maybe a conversation for another day. Um, Another key thing to remember, we touched on this before, but only the 529 value of the student who's going to college is included. Previously, you had to include the total value of all the accounts for all the kids, but now it's just the kid that you're applying for. And within these 529 accounts, you can transfer money penalty and tax free between beneficiaries. So there's nothing precluding you from moving money from the child who's going to college as 529 into little Johnny's, submitting the FAFSA, and then moving the money back. Um, and another item here too is previously on the FAFSA 401k, 403b retirement account contributions would be added back into the income as what they would call untaxed income. That's no longer the case. So if the school is only requiring the FAFSA form and you're making tax deductible 401k or 403b contributions, that will be protected from the SAI calculation. But if a school is requiring the CSS profile, they are going to see those contributions. So that will depend on the college. Okay, so back to this CSS profile. Again, couple hundred schools out there that require it. Main difference between it and the FAFSA is it's going to ask about your house. You don't have to report your home equity on the FAFSA, but on the CSS, they're going to ask you, what year did you buy your house? What did you pay for it? What's the value today? And what is your mortgage balance? And the difference between the value that you estimate and the mortgage balance or that equity, for the most part, they're going to look at it just like it's cash in your checking account. So if you have the unfortunate responsibility of completing this form, be conservative when you're valuing your home. Now, with Zillow and everything else, they can see what your home's worth or get an idea, but so you got to be reasonable. But my suggestion would be you're also being conservative. Um, and keep in mind, this form is a lot more intense than the FAFSA, a lot more questions, a lot more rooms for error, and it's not free. Um, and if the parents are divorced, unlike the situation previously where mom, dad were divorced, mom submitted the FAFSA, dad didn't have to do anything. Most of the schools that require the CSS also require what's called the non-custodial profile form. So now, if your kid's applying to Northwestern, not only is mom going to have to complete the FAFSA and the CSS, but then they're going to ask about dad, or the non-custodial parent in this example is going to have to fill out his own CSS. Um, and for this form, they're going to ask more details about your business. So you're going to have to put in, typically, they're going to ask not only for the value and any debt, but then also um, the gross earnings and the expenses as well. And this one, there's no FSA ID. Typically, your kids set up their own College Board account through the high school to track like ACT, SAT, that sort of thing. So more than likely, you'll find that your student has already created the College Board account, and you would log into that same account in order to submit the CSS profile. Okay, ED, EA, and RD. So early decision, early action, or regular decision. Again, especially if your kid is looking to go early decision, I think you almost have to utilize this MyCap software to give you an idea as to what you're looking at from a cost standpoint before you sign on that dotted line. Because if your kid goes early decision, that is a binding agreement. You're basically saying, look, if you accept me, we're signing up before you even know what they're offering, grants or scholarships. So no doubt that there is a risk there. The benefit, I guess, if any, is that typically when you go early decision, it gives you a leg up on admissions. So the student could have a better chance of getting admitted, but there's going to be a lot more unknown in terms of what the offer is going to be before having to accept it. Um, as you can imagine, you're going to lose a lot of leverage, right? You're going to get to see one offer, not to say that it's going to be a bad offer, but you're not going to have anything to compare it to. Whereas if your kid applies early action and regular decision, then you're going to get a bunch of different offers, get to compare them before you have to commit where you're going to go. And if you're looking to appeal and you have better offers elsewhere, that could be used as leverage. Now, early action, kind of like early decision, it usually means you're applying earlier than normal, so to speak. Just like early decisions, it can give you a leg up on admission, but it's a non-binding agreement. So it's great in that your kid's applying early. You're going to get answers back earlier. Typically, it could help them put them in a better position for scholarships, but you're not going to be bound to the offer. So you'll still get the option to compare it to the other schools. Um, and then regular decision, that's typically the last option in terms of the time frame. So the deadlines will all be pushed back. And you know, just like early action, it's non-binding, so you'll get to weigh all the offers before the student decides, but you also might be hearing back at a later time from those schools in terms of admittance and offers compared to early action and early decision. Okay, appeals. Now we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here if we've got juniors, but if you've got a senior, this is like the perfect time for appeals, right? Or figure for you junior parents, which I think is kind of everyone here, in about a year from now is when this process will start. When you've received the awards from the schools and you're trying to figure out, okay, what does all this mean? What do these costs look like? And where does my kid want to go? And the good news is is you can appeal or ask these schools for more money. Now, if you read on Facebook, people are going to tell you, "Well, just call the school and ask for more money, and they'll give it to you." It's not necessarily that easy. You've got to have a pretty strong argument. Um, in my mind, there's like two basic reasons why you're appealing. One, you have a change in circumstance. If you look at this, remember, you're going to be applying for aid for your juniors based off income in 2023, but you're not going to figure out what these offers are going to look like until the spring of 25. A lot can change over that time frame. So one way to appeal is a change in circumstance. I lost my job. I had taxable events on my 23 return that didn't happen in 24, or I had extenuating like health or medical expenses, or we're supporting grandma financially, things of that nature. And those are things that can definitely help your argument to reduce the SAI and get some more grants. But if that's not the case and nothing has changed and you just have different offers, some are better than others, um, then it's a little bit more difficult. Now it's not really an appeal per se, but more you're just trying to ask for more money. Um, and regardless of the case, whether it's a change in circumstance or you've got better offers elsewhere, you need to explain your story to the school. Add, because they don't understand any of this based on the basic forms that you're completing. So you need to intimate that to the schools. Um, as well as I think one of the key things you have to do is show interest. You always want to be leading with, this is really where my kid wants to go. This is their number one school. We want to send them there, that sort of thing. You need to have interest in the school for them to come back and help you with more money. I do not believe you should be going through this process in bad faith or with schools that your kid has no interest in attending. Only do it at the schools that they're really looking um, to go to. And be persistent. Like I said, don't just assume because you filled out the CSS profile and you wrote something in the end about your situation that they're going to read it. You need to go further directly through the financial aid office and make sure they understand the whole situation. Um, and then student leads the charge. I think this can be powerful, not from a financial aid appeal or dad or mom lost their job sort of thing, but more of, you know, the kid has a merit scholarship and they're looking to increase that. And the kid is taking onus on, reaching out to the admissions office and saying, hey, this is where I want to go, but my parents are only going to give me this much money. Is there anything else I can do to get more money, more scholarships to make this affordable for my parents so I can enroll here, that sort of thing. So I do think it can be powerful sometimes if it comes from the kid, but it depends on the situation. Again, if it's like a financial change, no, that's typically going to come from the parent because the student's not necessarily going to understand that type of information. Okay, next step. So hopefully, the information we've given you so far is going to give everyone a good start. I'm extremely confident in the fact that if you utilize the software and input your information correctly, you are going to get great feedback in terms of expectations as to what these schools are looking like from a price standpoint. um, so there's definitely some things that you can do on your own, but some people obviously need some more help and more guidance, and that's kind of what we're here to help you with. So um, if you want to kind of take this the next step forward and see, have Mike or I review your situation, kind of go through your info in a little bit more detail, which obviously we can't do right now. We're going to be offering 30-minute free consults to kind of go through your information and better help you understand how we can help you based on your specifics, um, which could be anywhere from helping you at an hourly standpoint to then all the way where Mike and I are working with you basically one on one to do everything. We're strategizing on where we're going to apply. We're completing all of the financial aid forms, the FAFSA, the profile, helping strategically fill those out like an accountant would fill out your tax return to minimize taxes, but we're doing it to maximize the grants, as well as understanding how to appeal to college and basically taking everything, soup to nuts from now until when your kid goes off to college next fall, making sure you're doing this as efficiently as possible, and not leaving any money on the table. So if you want some extra help or need some guidance or want to just get a level check of where your stand right now, um, I would click that link that we put in the chat as a way to sign up for one of those free consults, and then we can, go through your information, give you a better idea on maybe how we might be able to help you. Um, anything to add there, Mike?
No, I think that's perfect. Perfect. This is great that, especially looking ahead, as you and I know, Dan, with folks typically putting some of these things off perhaps later than they should, like the what is it? The early bird gets the worm. I don't know. It's a great Ben Franklin thinking here. Like the earlier you guys can get started on this and gain some insight and just understand, even starting with my cap and it basically giving you the lowdown on some numbers that you really need to understand to know where schools will be more affordable or less affordable. And there's so many different permutations then, as far as Dan was talking about from a strategy perspective. Okay, what are some of my options? Like uh, state schools that you're interested in, but typically when you reside in one state and you want to look into a state school in a different state, oftentimes, that out of state price is the tuition is 2 or 3 times higher. Is that kind of the final offer? Can you get anything more there? Well, there's tuition reciprocity programs based on certain regions of the country. Out here in the Seattle area, we have something we fondly call the WUI, the Western Undergraduate Exchange. And there's a bunch of big state schools in the Pacific Northwest and into the mountain region that essentially, based on the major, you might be able to get an in-state price for some of those schools. So if I'm in Seattle, I could go to University of Utah or Montana State or the University of Oregon. So there's all kinds of different permutations, and that's where we have some expertise and can provide some guidance from a, as Dan was saying, kind of a list building perspective. So
Yeah, the only thing I would add to is if you got a junior, this is the perfect time. Meaning, we have all the information now that we need to help you understand what this is going to look like. You've got your tax return done. Your kid's almost done with your junior year. We know the GPA. You probably have already taken the ACT or SAT. So we can get very accurate in terms of predicting, okay, if this is where you think your kid's going to apply in 4 months, here's what we're looking at in terms of the offer. How do we increase that offer? What else can we do um, to, get as much money as we can out of these schools? But even with all that information had, we also then have, 3, 4 months to strategize on how to approach this. So, um, it might seem like it's a long ways away because the school junior year is not even over. But again, the summer's going to go quick, and then boom, we're applying. So, I would say if you have interest in learning more, um, schedule one of those free consults, and we'll go from there and seeing on how we can help you.
Dan, is there kind of a high level summary or thought that you'd share regarding test scores? Because that's something that's, we see that a lot in the media, and test optional, and some schools are starting to change their strategy back to like requiring tests again, some of the real high end schools. I don't know what kind of guidance that you kind of provide as an introduction to that.
Yeah, I think it all depends on the school. I think the rule of thumb is if the score is going to put you in the top 25% of what that college typically sees from an ACT or SAT standpoint, then you're going to submit the score. If it doesn't, and especially if the student has a high GPA, then you're probably better off not submitting the test score. So it could depend, you could have a one answer at one school and a different answer at another, depending on the colleges and the situation. Um, we just
Okay.
got, could you please send the link for CAP? I don't see it in the chat. Assume they're
I'll
talking
definitely
about
do.
here.
Yeah, I don't know if you got
Should,
that.
okay. I just put the link in the chat for College Aid Pro. Um, the other link above that is the one just to schedule the free consult. But if you go to collegeaidpro.com, that's where you'll be able to set up your free MyCap profile and do everything else kind of we talked about here.
Well, I guess final call for questions before we finish up our webinar today. Going. Well, I wanted to thank you all for carving time out of your busy day in the week. We hope that this was giving you a good kind of baseline foundation, understand what some of the levers are and some of the things to start thinking about, and certainly encourage you, like Dan said, to don't put this off in the pile on the side of the desk and kind of forget about it, because it's a busy time. It's always a busy time, and senior year only gets busier. And it seems like time gets compressed. I don't know what Einstein had to say about senior year time being compressed, but uh, take advantage of this time now, like Dan said, and especially for those early decision and early action dates. Boy, those sneak up super fast early into the fall. So we'd love to be able to help you. Schedule some time with us, and we could talk through your situation and offer some guidance on that. And we look forward to serving you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.